All right, in this unit, we're going to start working with SQL with Oracle Application Express, which is the free Oracle instance that we get with Oracle Academy. I walked you through in a video previously how to set up your account with Application Express. So now that you hopefully have your account set up and you validated that you can access everything, starting in this unit, which is week 3 in the course, we're going to start learning how to do some stuff in SQL. So if you haven't already done so, if you've not already built the database tables for the hands-on assignments, you'll have to do that first in order to follow along with my video here. So basically, instead of giving you a PowerPoint presentation and going through all the minutiae of SQL commands, I'm going to show you instead. I think it's helpful to see these commands and see it working, and I'll walk you through all of the course concepts right in the screen here in Application Express. And again, you can follow along as I go, so you can learn the commands, and then you'll be able to replicate these when you do the assignments on your own for the hands-on assignments. So our first step is if I click on the SQL workshop, and you don't have to do this yet, I'm just going to show you. If I click on the object browser, I should have nothing in here because I haven't done anything yet, right? So there's no objects in here for me to work with. I have no tables. I have no no functions or store procedures or any of that stuff. I have nothing in here yet. So we have to create that stuff. So luckily they give us a nice little SQL script to do that. So you're going to click on SQL scripts so that we can run a SQL script. So let's go to this page. So first I have to upload my SQL script. So I'm going to click on upload, and it's going to ask me to go find the script so I can choose the file to upload it. Now here's the thing. Where do we get that file? Well, if you recall from, and I'll bring my screen over to show you. So this is the course in Blackboard, and if you recall, in week 1 I had all this information in here on how to connect to Oracle. And if you scroll down, these are the database scripts here. So these are the database scripts that you're going to need. So in this unit, we're going to start with the database script that has no unit number on. Later on, when we get to Chapter 5 in the textbook, we'll use the Chapter 5 script to build that version of the database. But for right now, let's go ahead and download the first one. So I'm just going to click on that. And when you click on it, it's going to download it. So you can see down here in my browser, it downloaded here. So then I'm going to go and find that file. So I'm going to click Choose File. All right, so there's my SQL script that I downloaded. I found it in my downloads. So I'm going to click on Open. I'm going to call this script, I'll just call it the same thing. So JLDB, well, week 3, since we're doing this in week 3. All right, I'm going to upload that script. And once you do that, you'll see that script right here in the list. And in order to run that script, you're going to go over here to the right-hand side, and you're going to click that Run button. So let me click on that. All right, it's parsing the script, so hopefully it's running. All right, I'm going to, now if you run it in the background, there's nothing we can do anyway. So I'm going to do Run Now so I can see what it's doing here in the foreground. So let me hit Run Now. There we go, completed. So that was pretty quick. So it ran the script. So now that it ran the script, I'm going to go into the object browser. And I should see more stuff in here now. I should see a bunch of tables. So let's see what happens. There we go. So now I see some tables. I see books, customers, order times, orders, and so forth. So this is basically a demonstration database for a, and the demonstration is basically it's a bookstore, right? So this is just a small bookstore. And we have a little database of our books and our orders and our customers and so forth. And we'll use this as a demonstration of some of the concepts in the course. So the first thing we're going to learn about in this course is using select statements, the basic select statement, which we use to basically get information from the database. Now, theoretically, you could just click over here. So I could click on books, and it will show me the contents of the books table. But we don't want to use the GUI to do this. We want to try using SQL commands because we want to learn how to do SQL and do SQL programming. So instead of using this interface, the Object Explorer, instead we're going to go to SQL commands. And just pretty much everything we're going to do in this course is going to probably be in SQL commands. So let's get this loaded. So and you won't have this in yours, I just typed this in, but this is the basic syntax of a select statement in SQL, in Oracle, using SQL. SQL is the language, Oracle is the database engine. So whenever I say SQL, I'm just talking about the language that we're using. Some people use the term SQL to describe Microsoft SQL Server, so they'll say, is that a SQL server? And if they do, they mean that's a Microsoft SQL Server. But Microsoft certainly doesn't own the term SQL. It's Oracle also used the SQL language. It's just called Oracle, the database engine. So in any event, this is the basic syntax of a select statement. It looks a little confusing here, but we're going to break this down a little bit. And the first thing I should tell you is everything below from we're probably not going to use today. We'll learn about those later on. So we'll learn about restricting rows and group functions and things like that further on in the course. For right now, the only part we're really going to use is this first part up here. And you'll see this in your textbook as well. And I just want to kind of break down what this means when they show you the syntax. So anything that you see inside these brackets is optional, which means that if I'm writing a select statement, so let me come down here. I'm going to write select, and we'll do star from, and I'm going to select from customers. All right, so this is everything inside these brackets is optional. So I don't have to type that in front of my star here. And then I can choose any of these options inside here. So I could either do star, or I can list specific column names, and optionally I could alias those column names with a different name if I wanted to display differently when I select that table. So here I have select star, which just means select all of my columns from my table, but I don't have distinct or unique. And by the way, this pipe in the middle here means or. So that means I can prefix my column list with either distinct or unique. So I could type select distinct star or select unique star, although it'd be redundant to do so. They're unique by definition and distinct by definition. We'll talk about that later on. But I could also list I could put a list of column names in, and if I want to, I can alias those column names, which I'm going to show you how to do here in a little bit. So that's basically what this syntax is telling you. Now I'm going to get rid of this now because I can't run this, obviously, this command, because it's not a real command. It's just showing you the syntax, but this is what I'm going to run to demonstrate how this works. So let me get rid of this. Okay, so now let's see what happens when I run this command. So I'm going to go up here to the upper right. I'm going to click on Run. And if you notice down here, I'm going to move this up so you can see more of these results. But here's my results, right? So I have a customer number, the last name, the first name, their address, city, state, zip, and so forth. So that's basically the contents of that table, and this is all the contents of that table. So it says here more than 10 rows are available. Increase low selector to view more rows. So it looks like it only returns the first 10 rows in this little application here. So for the purposes of this course, you may, just so you can see what's really happening, you can go up here to rows and set that to 10,000, for example. And now it won't restrict the number of rows. So now we see a few more rows, just 20, right? So we only have 20 records in our database for the customers. So that's how we do a basic select statement. That's the most basic thing we can do with SQL. We can try to select the records from our database. So we're saying select, and the star means all columns from customers. Now let's try a different example. This time I'm going to select star from titles. Oh, I'm sorry, from books. My apologies. There we go. So I'm going to select all my books. And here we get a list of books. We only have 14 books in our store. This is a pretty small store. But let's say I only wanted to see the titles, right? So I don't care about all the other fields, so I'm going to select title from books instead. And now this will only output the title. So now you can see I just have the title for all of my books. Now I don't know if you recall, but in addition to the title, there are other fields. So for example, I could also show the publication date. So select title, comma, pub date, and now it will show both of those rows, or columns rather. So now I have the publication date and the title of the book. So I can indicate which columns I want to see in my result set. So here I have just the title and the publication date. when I put the star on here, it selected everything. And I'm not sure if Oracle's going to let me put the star and the column names. Yeah, see, that doesn't work. In some database engines, you can put the star, you can put star and some columns, but Oracle doesn't let you do that, or at least not from this interface. So let's try something a little different. Let's do title and category. So now we'll show both the title. Oh, and I spelled category wrong, so of course that would fail. And actually, let's see what happens when I do that. So if I type the wrong column name, notice down here at the bottom I get a error telling me that category is an invalid identifier. So I can't do that. I have to use the correct spelling. Obviously, the computer won't be able to, the database engine won't be able to fix our spelling for us automatically. Now, let's say title isn't descriptive enough. I want to have a report, or I want to somehow output the data with a more descriptive column name, or I want to change it to a different column name. So this is where we can use aliasing. So instead, I could put as, and let's say I wanted to say title of book. Now, you would think you could probably just type something like this. The problem is there's spaces between each one of these, and the database engine's not going to know that you're not including another keyword. It's going to see that white space and think you're indicating some other keyword, and it's going to fail. So let's see what happens. So you can see here it says keyword not found where it's expected, right? It doesn't know what the heck I'm doing. So in order to retain that formatting, I have to put quotes around it. So now if I put double quotes around that, it should output what I'm looking for. There we go, title of book. By the way, the as portion in Oracle, I believe that's going to be, you don't have to put as on there. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so you can leave off the as if you like. It's best practice, however, to use the correct syntax. So you want to type as in there. It'll get you in the habit of using the correct syntax. Other database engines, and it's a nice thing about this course, is we're learning Oracle, SQL for Oracle. But everything you learn in this class, you can apply to just about any other database engine. Even some of the newer database engines that are object-oriented, like Hadoop and Couch and Mongo and things like that, support SQL syntax. So it's good to get in the hang of using the correct syntax, even though some things will work in Oracle without exactly the right syntax. I'm going to show you the sort of the official right way of using the syntax in SQL that will work in other database engines as well, like Microsoft SQL Server or MySQL or something like that. Obviously, there's a good chance in the field that you'll run into all these different database engines. So I can also do the same thing for category. So I'll do the same thing again, but this time I'm just going to use a, you know what? I'll spell it wrong. So I'll do category. Right? So I'm going to spell it wrong like I did the first time. Maybe for some reason I need to have an alias with the wrong spelling. So now if I run my query, I don't have quotes around that. So it should work because there's no spaces, there's no special characters. And you can see it worked, right? So I have the my new column here. You can see it's spelled incorrectly over here. It's not using this version of the column name. Now, one thing you might notice is that it uppercase. Everything is now uppercase in the column. If I want to retain the case, again, I can use my double quotes, and now it will display it exactly as I've typed it in the as the alias. So now you can see it's mixed case. It capitalized the C. Now let's go ahead and take a look at all the columns again. So I'm going to use the star so we can see everything, which is also called the wildcard. Okay, so here's a bunch of fields. Now, in addition to just selecting a column, we can also do some basic arithmetic operations on the columns as well, and use an alias at the same time. So for example, I want to show the titles of all of my books, but I want to see what the profit amount is. So what is my profit going to be on these books? So to figure out the profit, you can see there's a column for retail. So I'm going to do retail. There's also a column for cost. If I subtract the retail from the cost, that should give me the profit. Let's see if that works. All right, so this is showing me the profit for each one of those books. So basically how much money I make for each one of these books that I sell. Now it's not obvious that this is profit, so I'm going to add an alias. So now it will say profit instead of retail minus cost. So now I have a column for title and a column for the profit, which I'm calculating with some basic math. Now an important note about the arithmetic in Oracle is that just like on a calculator, it's going to follow the order of operations. If you recall, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally from 5th grade math class when you learned order of operations. You'll have to remember that for working with arithmetic operations in Oracle, because it will use the same order of operations. Now, a good trick is to just use parentheses if you can't recall which one's going to happen first. But as a rule of thumb, parentheses are always parsed first, followed by multiplication and division, and then finally addition and subtraction. So if you're using arithmetic operations, just keep in mind the order of operations. So if you're trying to figure out why you're not getting the answer you're looking for, that could be why. In the assignments, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit more complicated arithmetic operations, so you may have to think back to the order of operations in order to have it work correctly. All right, so let's add a few more columns to this select list. We'll get rid of this arithmetic operation and go back to some static columns. So here I've selected the title, the retail amount, and the discount, if there is a discount. Now, I should tell you, in Oracle, in Application Express, it's a little confusing in Application Express the way they do this, but where you see this single dash, that's actually a null. So a null means the absence of any value. Null is not zero. Null means nothing, not zero. I know sometimes that's confusing because some people say, well, zero does mean nothing. But if you store the value of zero in a column, that's a value in that column. It may be zero, but it's a value. Now, if you store null, which means don't put anything in that column, there is no value at all. There's no zero, there's nothing. That's treated a little bit differently by the database engine. And just to show you an example of that, in addition to the title, retail, and discount, maybe I want to show the price after the discount, which is going to be retail minus the discount. Now, you would think that if it's nothing, right? So, for example, this book costs $30.95. Well, let me do this one first. This one is $59.95. With a $3 discount, the total should be $56.95. So it'll show me in my last column here, it's going to show me $56.95. Now, $30.95, if there's no discount, you and I would say, okay, it's going to be $30.95. But let's see what it does. Does it show us $30.95? It does not. It shows us nothing, right? Because if you take something and subtract nothing from something, you end up with nothing. So that's the basic concept. Null values will ruin your day if you're not sure that they're there or you don't handle them properly. So it's important to be aware of null values and that they will output something maybe that you're not looking for. We're going to learn a little bit more about how to deal with null values later on in the course when we talk about row and column, row and group functions. So we'll talk about that later on, and we'll learn some elegant ways to deal with null values. But for right now, you're going to make sure that you understand that if there is a null value, you're going to get a value that you weren't expecting for that column. You and I might expect $30.95 for the price of that book with no discount. But in Oracle, it says subtracted from nothing, so it simply shows nothing. Now let's take a look back at the customer table. So we're going to do select star from customer. So if you look in the customers table, we have some information about the customer. And one thing that's kind of grouped about these customers is the state that they live in, right? In any given set of customers, in any database, if you have addresses, you're probably going to have, unless you have exactly 50 customers that all live in a different state, you're going to have some grouping there. So if I wanted to just get a list of the states in my database, so if I do select state from customers, take a look at what happens here. So I get 20 rows, right? And notice that not all of these states are listed just once. Florida is listed multiple times. I think California is listed multiple times. Here's Florida again. Here's New Jersey listed twice, right? So if you recall earlier when I showed you the syntax for a select statement, one of the keywords that you can prefix your column list with was distinct. So let's try that. Let's do select distinct state. What this should do is show us only each state one time. And here we go. So now we only get 12 rows, and each state is only listed once. So here we have each state listed exactly one time. So the distinct keyword is going to show you a distinct set of records. It doesn't have to be just one column. You can use the distinct keyword with multiple columns. It will simply find a distinct record for multiple columns. All right, so finally, let me go back to star so we can see all of our columns again. Now, let's say I wanted to get a list of my customers' names, right? So if I want to get a list of my customers' names, I could do it like this. I could do select last name. Actually, let's do it this way. We'll do first name, comma, last name. And I should get two columns, one for the first name and one for the last name. And here you see that it has done that. Now the thing is, what if I want to present this data where the first name and the last name are one column instead of two columns? So Oracle allows us to do that. The way we're going to do that is we're going to concatenate these. The concatenation operator is two pipes. So the pipe, if you're not sure, if you look above your enter key, you hit shift and press the button above the enter key, unless you're doing this on an Android phone or something, and it will concatenate those two columns together. Now this isn't going to give us exactly what we want. Notice what happens when I run this. I get the first and the last name all kind of bunched up together. Obviously I want to put a space between these two names. So I'm going to concatenate a space in here as well. So I'm going to use single quotes. Single quotes is for what we call a literal string, or a string literal in Oracle, which means whatever you put inside these quotes, it's simply going to output. I don't use double quotes because if you recall, double quotes is the format for an alias. So I'll put here customer full name. So this will alias this, and if you recall, it's best if we use the as keyword. So remember, the double quotes are going to be for my aliases, but my single quote can be used for my literal string. So I'm going to concatenate this string right between these two. So let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. There we go, that looks a little better. So now I have my first name and the last name in a single list. I could also switch this up a little bit. Maybe instead of having a space, let's say I'm going to do the first name, or I'm sorry, the last name, followed by the first name. And in most lists that have a first and a last name, where the last name is first, if we switch it around, you usually would show that with a comma between the two. And there we go. So now we have our last name, comma, and then the first name. So we can do some formatting with our data. So again, this is the concatenation operator. So in this video, I showed you the basic syntax of the select statement. We learned how to select all columns from our table, or only certain columns. And then I showed you how to alias those columns with a different name. We talked about how to do basic arithmetic operations with your columns, so you can add, subtract, multiply, divide multiple columns, and how to use the order of operations, or make sure we're using the order of operations when we're doing so. And then I talked about the concatenation operator, and I also discussed null values and how we have to understand that null values will sometimes cause a different result when we're doing arithmetic operations. And that concludes this unit.